Die Grenzwacht hielt im Osten dem Feinde lange stand. Heut kehrt ihr letzter Posten zurück ins Vaterland.
You know, at this point, it's just exhausting to be right. And I don't mean right politically, I mean to be correct, because the right will not get this, but hopefully they'll start to understand. So, if you see a news story, you can usually make a prediction, and this is a great example of one of the most predictable news stories I've ever seen. So this has been blowing up over my long weekend. It's been something that I've seen a lot of articles about, the disappearance of Eliza Fletcher, and in a lot of ways it's perfect. It's a perfect little shock for not just middle America, but also the super rich. You know, she is everything which is ideal in this older vision of America. She was a teacher. She really loved kids. She had a couple kids. She has these two sons, blonde little boys that are constantly out and having fun. She loves her kids. They're all over her Instagram. She has a husband that she's actually fully married to. She attends church. She writes about church and writes about the verses that have affected her. And she's active in the community. And she's also active and healthy in general. She was out jogging. But then, oh, what a shock. It's too early in the morning. It's 4:30 a.m. And she gets, quote, violently pulled into a vehicle by some assailant. They pretty quickly found the vehicle. But even from this description, I can get a couple key details really, really quickly. A couple key details that made me predict things before subsequent articles came out. I mean, honestly, but you should also be making these predictions too. So, first, I noted that it's a completely random thing. You know, very clearly, it's just this random SUV coming up. It's a crime of opportunity, maybe not. Maybe they watched, but very clearly, it's someone who's having this opportunity to stalk this woman. I'm noting that she is a woman and maybe she's being taken for that reason. I'm also noticing that she's a white woman. Now, who do I think the suspects would be in this completely random attack? Maybe attack and most likely sexual assault. And death at this point would be what I'd predict also. And so you can see, like, these are a couple things that I'm already predicting, which maybe you don't know as I'm releasing this video, but you can probably pretty much assume that. So who do I think these suspects are? Well, I think straight off that the suspect or suspects are of African descent. Now, sure, I mean, it's possible for there to be another suspect. There could be a Hispanic or Arabic assailant. There could even be a European assailant. That's all possible, and that does happen. That's happened in one prominent case more recently. But still, if I'm going to bet, and I'm going to bet especially based on some of the evidence, including how obvious the vehicle is, I probably can bet correctly here. And I would have won this bet. I would have won this bet again because we already have our suspect. And yeah, that's the case. And this affords us a couple different opportunities, a couple different angles to talk about this story in brief. Well, so Cleotha Abston is suspected in the abduction. And also, let's not miss that another person, potentially his friend, was also taken in, though maybe not charged yet. So I want you to think back to a certain Colin Flaherty book and think back to how groups get together and they're willing to do things. And I'm going to reference that again in a moment. And I want you to think, do you know people around you immediately right now who you could talk to about doing criminal activities, potentially really, really messed up criminal activities? See, that's kind of weird. It's kind of weird from where we're coming from, and that's kind of mind-blowing considering that we could be coming from an angle where you might even say to, let's say, your European friend, hey, We have this really weird anti-white system all around us. What do you think we should do about it? That's already going to put your European friend on edge, unfortunately, and that doesn't make sense. Let alone would most of you have a friend, a Western friend, that you can just turn to and say, hey, let's go capture a woman. Let's go beat people up, something like that. No, there's something very weird happening in other communities, and it is a community thing. It's a thing which is only applicable to other people, other non-Europeans, and specific groups of non-Europeans that we can note. To continue this thought, another example is actually offered by Fletcher's pastor for this same area. Here we have this pastor, George Robertson, saying, quote, someday we'll eliminate this kind of tragedy, he told Commercial Appeal. We also grieve the abduction that occurred a couple days ago near Wolf Chase. We grieve all this kind of violence and evil in our city. It just makes us grieve. We grieve for ourselves. We grieve for the Fletchers. And we also grieve for our city. Our whole city is hurting. And I want to start here by noting that he is using the term eliminate, and he's talking in more the present tense. He's talking more in terms of on this earth, in this community. And I think that's really good. That's in the right direction. That's in the direction that we need to be in. It is your responsibility. It is always your moral responsibility to take care of the here, the now, and your own community. Now, your community is under assault. Let's take a look also. He's referring to this Wolf Chase abduction. Memphis mom, 1-year-old, abducted outside Target at midday. And the police are still hunting the suspects, though they have some completely clear pictures here. These suspects, you would think people would easily recognize. You would think that these guys wouldn't be too hard to find, but maybe it's just that we don't have enough tips on them. Maybe it's that people who know them are not offering the information. So that's another angle, the assault that's happening on this community. And actually, let's talk now about the wealth within Eliza's family, Eliza Fletcher. Now, a lot of people noted the $50,000 award that the family was willing to offer up for any tips, which is not just a savings, that could be an amount that's paid out multiple times over if you had a couple different tips coming in. So the family is rather wealthy, and actually these articles are very fond of reminding us of that. They again and again mention this Orgill Inc. and her grandfather, Joseph Orgill III, as a billionaire. And that's some interesting messaging right there, that the papers are reporting on this, and they're reporting on it a lot. It might scare them. It might make them feel like they're not safe. And I think this runs right into one of my key points that I've been making for a while now, that there's no magic protection. There's no magic shield that just surrounds the super wealthy even. There's nothing that just makes it okay. They live in these communities. Communities exist. People exist. People are all around them all the time. Cities exist. Everything that could possibly go wrong could go wrong. And as exhibited here, they have friends, they have family who all live in and around these areas where they're making their money. More and more, really, because of demographic changes, there are no Western countries that are left just to exist in, with relative stability and an old type of stability. The type of stability that you heard about from back in the day. The type of safety that you heard about from back in the day. A high trust community where if there were people driving around in SUVs looking to victimize jogging women, guaranteed there were less of them back then. But we can all note what this super wealthy group has done to these communities, and yeah, obviously it affects them too, as I've said many times before. Actually, if we look at Mr. Orgill, I managed to find his brief write-up after his death through the commercial appeal. Well, he did a lot of things. He was again very involved in the church. He was very involved in his family. And all this sounds very good. He was described as a philanthropist. And actually, mostly that seems good, that he was charitable and he wasn't going out and donating to NGOs necessarily. He was involved in Meals on Wheels. He actually went out and volunteered himself. So that seems like a nice guy. But at the same time, then, he's noteworthy for, as they like to say, equality. They say that he was one of a group of 5 deep-pocketed white Episcopalians who sought to mediate the sanitation workers' strike of 1968 and drew attention for their willingness to listen to representatives of African American strikers. So, if that's what you leave behind, just think about this too. How much did Mr. Orgill, his businesses, and his decisions within businesses affect the future of his own area? How much did he affect the future of Memphis? How much did he contribute to the change in demographic, which had something to do with what seems to be now the murder of his granddaughter? And that's a more visceral reality. But on a larger scale, something that's happening consistently in the background, there are only ever so many resources. So if you are in favor of redistributing resources to a certain group, perhaps to the detriment of others, perhaps you're encouraging one group to grow and the other group to shrink. Perhaps you're ensuring that one group attains resources again and again, and you're neglecting to assist another group that might want certain resources, and maybe they want a safe, nice area for their kids to grow up in. This is a subject that I really want the wealthy especially to think about very deeply. Think very, very deeply as you reconsider every penny that you've spent, all the charity that you've done, every word out of your mouth. Think about it. Think about what you do with the future. And as you look around at the decay, the decline, and the abuse, the victimization of the Western world, who do you honestly think needs help? Who do you believe you can actually help? Because regardless of how much money you have, you can't change everything. You probably can't stop a hurricane, you probably can't stop a tornado, and you probably can't change nature itself either if you recognize it constantly all around the world, regardless of the context. And from here, I also want you to take another angle. I want you to also look at the system itself, at the system where, to a certain degree, the wealthy people can be ignored. Certainly when you're in the correct circle. Because, as I was just indicating, obviously there is a safe response. There's a response, like the pastor might be starting to give, that says, you know what, we should deal with these crime issues. And maybe we should deal with them in a very real way. But my prediction, of course, is that rather than going to protect the billionaires even, the news will inevitably still protect this belief system, actually. What they're going to do first and foremost is ensure that their narrative is maintained. Ensure that their world adheres to their own religious teachings. That being the religious teachings that have usurped all other religious teachings and have infiltrated into any teaching that they can get their hands on. So my prediction was obviously they're going to cover up. They're going to make sure that as soon as there's a whiff of black on white violence, black on white rape, assault, especially because this is the old stereotype playing out. An old stereotype that I kept hearing was, just a false accusation or something. Well, obviously they're going to search deep and make sure that the reporter on the scene is a highly educated, top of the class African American. Now let's take a look. Yep. Well, here's WREG News Channel 3. They're an associate of CBS, and this was the first clip I saw starting to reveal the actual suspect once he was in custody. And, I'm right again. Like I said, it's so easy to predict once you see the patterns. Now, you can doubt me. You can say, oh, you didn't make these predictions. You only have this video out now. But you could make these predictions too. That's something that you're going to have to come to terms with, that you could make these predictions, because it is that easy to recognize an anti-white system that will put forth the best that they have with cleaned up hair, not doing the afro or anything, the straightened out hair to better imitate some European hairstyle, and just tons of makeup. But I can't help but look and say, is this where they've gotten now for the best and brightest? Is this where they are now, the best that they could find to represent the good side when the bad side of a group is revealed to be exceedingly harmful to innocent people, our innocent people? And you know what? Just looking at this picture, just looking for a second, I gotta say, I don't see the benefit. I don't know why I would keep accepting the representation of the best, the kindest, when the harm does not end. The slide away from Western civilization into an alien, hostile civilization controlled by someone else just does not end. You see, I don't anymore accept the representation of the best and brightest. I don't accept the representation of the good, because that only perpetuates harm done to my people. And that's the exact implication that I'm getting from this news coverage and that repeated pattern that I see over and over again. Feel free to look for yourself. But once you notice it, I don't want you to think, oh, that's just something that the news does as a cover-up. I want you to think what it means in reality. It means that this news channel, the anti-white executives, are doing this so that they can better perpetuate the victimization of innocent people, our innocent people.
Ich darf nicht länger zagen, bald zwingt sie euren Sinn, nach Ostland sie zu tragen. Sie will, sie muss dorthin. Nach Ostland sie zu tragen. Sie will, sie muss dorthin.